Why do we eat? Why don't we just say that's enough?
Because we died.
Yeah, the death part.
Right, survive.
Wouldn't it save a lot of trouble though? No more shopping and chopping,
Yes.
chewing, eating, defecating. I mean, just so much time, energy, effort.
You sold me.
So, if we don't eat, we die. Why do we die? From boredom?
Nutrition.
Yeah, so we need to get something from what we eat that keeps us from dying. What is it we need from what we eat?
Nutrients?
Well, some source of energy. If all we needed were energy, we could just drink oil. Because oils are the most concentrated source of calories, so it'd be the least amount of trouble. Just get a big barrel of it, 55-gallon drum, couple squirts, and we'd be done with it. So would we get enough calories from oil?
Yes.
Oh yeah. But obviously there's more than just calories. What else do we need from the diet that we eat, whatever diet that is?
Nutrients. Vitamins.
Okay, we need water. So you can drink water or you can eat foods that contain water, but one way or the other you've got to get water. You're mostly water. Without water you die. In fact, how long can you go without eating? How long can the average 70-kilogram male go, skinny guy?
40 days?
70 days. Okay, so how long can you go without drinking?
3 or 4
9.
days.
Maybe 7 days. You dehydrate, you die. And how long can you go without breathing?
Not long.
About 7 minutes. Anybody want to give it a try? And see?
Don't hold
So
your breath.
theoretically, food is not like the highest thing on our priority list in terms of what you need to survive. Breathing is clearly more critical. Drinking, much more critical. And then eating. So, okay, so all we need is water and oil. No, turns out we need protein. There's 20 amino acids that make up all the components of the cells. 12 of them you can actually make from carbohydrates. Your body can kind of reformulate carbohydrates to make those amino acids. But 8 of those amino acids you cannot make unless you get them in a preformed way. 10 is kids, 8 is adults. And so they're called essential amino acids. Why are they called essential amino acids? Because they're essential. Those people were so creative. So they have to come in. Do they have to come in every meal? Do they have to be in every mouthful? No. They just have to come over the course of your diet during the course of the year. You have to get a balance of it. You don't have to have them at every meal or at every mouthful. But you do need enough of each of those essential amino acids so that you can form the structural components of cells that are made from proteins. You also need fat because there's something called essential fatty acids. Specifically, we're talking about omega-3 fatty acids, or so that you can make things like docosahexohexanic acid. So your essential fatty acids, your EFA3s, have to come in a preformed way. Where could you get EFAs in the diet? What happens to have a lot of essential fatty acids?
Flax.
Well, flax seeds, walnuts, nut seeds, also green vegetables. Now, for most people, they don't eat very much green vegetables. They're the decoration on the plate. They're a little bit of something they remove on their hamburger. But for those of us that eat large quantities of green vegetables, it actually has a substantial amount of essential fatty acids and vitamins and minerals and other things. Just out of curiosity, do you all know how to tell if you have a big enough salad? If you don't have a scale to weigh a pound or more? It's real simple. You just make it, put it down on the table, and wait for your friends to walk in the room. And they'll go, "Oh my God, you're not going to eat all that, are you?" And if they don't react with shock and awe, then you've got to get a bigger bowl. So that's how you do it. Vitamins. You need vitamins. Why do you need vitamins? For example, vitamin C. What happens if you don't get vitamin C? Scurvy. That's what happened to sailors. They went on the ocean for 6 months, no fresh fruits or vegetables. They ate hardtack and bread and dried bread, and they got scurvy. Then they discovered that if they would take some limes with them and once in a while suck on a lime, they would get something. They didn't know what it was, but they knew they got something that prevented scurvy. Later we discovered that something was vitamin C. That's why they used to call them limeys, because they would carry limes to kind of, yeah. So vitamins are substances that were so ubiquitous in the environment of your ancestors that you over time lost the ability to form those things. It turns out not having to maintain the biosynthetic machinery to make stuff you don't need, like vitamin C, is a biological advantage, and there's been plenty of studies to document that. The way they, for example, if you take yeast and you put them in a nutrient-rich environment, those yeast grow. If you modify one form of yeast so they no longer make tryptophan, an essential amino acid, and you put them in an environment with no tryptophan, obviously the genetically modified yeast die because they can't make their own. But what's interesting is if you take those same yeast, put them in an environment with lots of tryptophan, the genetically modified yeast not only survive, because they can get it from the environment, but they take over. They outcompete the other yeast. They're identical in every way except for the loss of the ability to make tryptophan. And the reason is that if you don't have to maintain extra biosynthetic machinery, it gives you a selective advantage. And so apparently, ancient ancestors were in an environment of abundant vitamin C, tropics. No big reason to maintain the ability to do that yourself. Over time, lost the ability to do it itself. That was an advantage. Today, humans in Indian fruit-eating bats and dachshunds don't make their own vitamin C. Rats do, which is really interesting because they used to do studies on vitamin C with rats, not knowing that rats made their own vitamin C. It obviously created a little bit of confusion. So vitamins are substances that catalyze chemical reactions. They're important, necessary components. So whatever diet we put together, it better have enough of the vitamins like vitamin C and the B complex, etc. We also need minerals, which are the structural components of the cells, form the structural components of the cells and all kinds of chemical reactions. You get them from vegetable materials in abundance. You also need fiber. Fiber is the relatively indigestible part of the food. When you don't get enough fiber, what happens to your stools?
Hard.
Get hard and small because a lot of the stool is bacteria and fiber. And the fiber form the prebiotic that help normalize the bacterial flora. So when you don't have a good diet, you get hard stools, you get constipation. What happens to people with constipation? They strain. What happens to people that strain? They get hemorrhoids and fissures and varicose veins and prolapsed uteruses and digestive prolapse and all kinds of problems that used to be like really rare and are now like ubiquitous.
And then they need a digital disimpaction.
So, diverticulitis is another factor that can be secondary to mechanical disruption or aggravated. There are other things besides just constipation, but that's certainly a factor with diverticulitis and hemolysis. So we get a lot of problems from constipation. It's important to know that 70% of your immune system is involved with your digestive system. Why would so much of your immune system be tied into the digestive system? Because that's obviously where most of the exogenous agents from the outside world interact with your body. That's how stuff comes into the body. So that immune system keeps the bacteria and the toxins and other problems from overwhelming you. Think how sick you get if you eat some dead decaying flesh that has a little bit of contamination in it. You get that explosive diarrhea, and sometimes it can even be fatal. Because bacteria poo can sometimes be poisonous. If you have the wrong kind of bacteria and their waste products get in your system, they can be highly toxic. Cholera, for example. What is it about cholera? Well, the waste products from cholera happen to be really nasty. So the right kind of bacteria is important. Now remember, the bulk of your stool, a whole bunch, trillions of cells in your body are bacteria, outside little agents that have their waste products being given off. If you have the wrong kind of bacteria, that's a big problem. And so maintaining normal microflora is important, normal microbiota. In fact, the normal microbiota keep the abnormal microbiota in check. But if you take antibiotics and wipe out everything, good guys and bad guys, sometimes the bad guys can grow and foster, and now you've got all kinds of problems. So that's why people, prebiotics and post-probiotics and different things to try to rebalance the gut. Of course, the most effective way is often doing nothing, fasting. Fasting has a very powerful effect in terms of normalizing gut microbiota. And the prebiotics that you need to eat is the diet, the plant-based diet. And that's why after fasting, you go back on a fruit vegetable diet. Now you've got the right environment for normal flora to regrow, and eventually you can recover, and it can be critical to your immune function. Phytochemicals, there's a couple thousand known chemicals. Oh, by the way, let's go back, fiber. How much fiber is there in beef? What about organic beef? Natural, raised on the farm, blessed by the guru organic beef. And how about fish?
Zero.
Chicken?
Zero.
Right. And dairy products like cheese? Like low-fat organic cheese? And yeah. So there's no fiber in any animal food because animal cells don't have cellulose. So it only comes from plants. Okay? Plants, only source of fiber. So if people are not getting enough fiber, it's because they're eating lots of animal product, not enough plant product, or the plant product has had all of its goodness removed, like flour, white sugar, processed food products. And then phytochemicals, the 2,000 chemicals known. How many phytochemicals in organic chicken?
0.
Yeah. So these come from plant-based foods again. So whatever diet we put together, whether it's the dead Dr. Atkins diet, may his filet of soul rest in peace, he was not a hypocrite. I'll give him credit. He stuck to that diet till the day he died. Yeah, 268 pounds from cardiomyopathy. Not a hypocrite. Okay. So whatever diet we put together, it better have the things we need in optimum concentration if we're going to try to sustain health. So whatever diet we're going to talk about, we've got to think about what is it we're really trying to accomplish. We're trying to get enough calories and water, protein, fat, vitamins, minerals, fiber, and phytochemicals. Now, is that the only problem? If that was all, maybe we could just drink some oil, drink some water, take some protein powder, and take a vitamin mineral pill, and then have some tree bark for fiber. Would that ensure us optimum health? No, because there's another side of this. Not only do we need to get enough of everything, but we need to avoid excess. Because it turns out too much of these things can be a really big problem. Now, in the world of our ancient ancestors, was getting too much a big issue? No, so there was no evolutionary advantage to be worrying about too much. In a natural setting, 95% approximately of humans never lived to reproduce. They died from predation, they died from starvation. Only the toughest survived, and they passed on their DNAs. Those are your ancestors. The ones that didn't survive were the losers. They're not your ancestors. They didn't make it. So the ancestors were designed to involve an environment of scarcity. So everything was about get enough, get enough, get enough. Never worried too much about, oh, don't get too much. No, not likely. So, one of the things you can get too much of are animal foods. Animal foods biologically concentrate the toxins from the environment in their cells, so when you eat an animal food, you get its entire lifetime accumulation of toxins. Could be 10 to 1,000 times the concentration in a calorie of animal foods that you might find in a calorie of plant foods. So meat, fish, fowl, eggs, and dairy products all suffer from this problem of biological concentration. And they're very concentrated in fat and protein. It turns out too much protein is a big problem. Too much fat is a big problem. We know the association of excess fat and protein with heart disease, cancer, kidney disease, right down the list. Too much turns out to cause metabolic syndrome-related conditions, or conditions that Dr. McDougall talks about as the diseases of kings. The diseases that only the wealthy elite kings used to get that are now ubiquitous, in large part because of too much animal food. He's joining us today, isn't he?
Yes, he is, and his
Good. I have
wife.
to think of ways to make fun of him. That's good. Okay. No, he's actually one of my heroes. Okay. Don't tell him I said that.
You just told him.
Okay. The other thing we need to avoid are chemicals added to our food. Chemicals added to our food. Things like oil, salt, and sugar, these are not actually foods by definition. They're highly processed food byproducts. They are chemicals added to our food. Oil is not a food. It is a byproduct, a manufactured, concentrated byproduct, and it has consequences. And consequences are that they fool the satiety mechanism of the brain. It leads to the dietary pleasure trap. People get fat, sick, and develop the disease of dietary excess when they eat them. So the issue with these things is, how fat and sick do you want to be? That's really the question. Can I eat a little bit? Sure. Be a little bit fat, a little bit sick. Want to be a lot fat, a lot sick? Eat all you want. Do like everybody else. Notice there's one food byproduct that gets to be on both lists. It's both a highly concentrated food byproduct and an animal food, dairy products. Probably one of the most noxious agents that we could give to people, and yet we enforce it at the point of a gun. We basically make laws saying you must give your children dairy products. We will threaten to take children away sometimes, parents that refuse to give dairy products. We pass federal laws that say you will lose your federal subsidy funding if you don't give your children dairy products, including the 80 or 90% of Asians and blacks and others that don't even have the ability to break down lactose, the sugar in milk, because it's not part of the natural diet. Yet we must give them, no soy milk or rice milk alternative substitute. No, you give them the real thing. And the dairy industry is only concerned about you and your children's health.
Right.
That's why the FDA is from the government here to protect you. Says that you cannot sell milk products if there's more than 750,000 pus cells per cc. Why not more? Well, it'd be like pure pus. People might object. So now, in fairness, does the average milk product you go in the grocery store have 750,000 pus cells per thimbleful or cc? No, it's not even half that much. Only 322,000 pus cells per cc, so not even half the legal limit.
But who's counting?
So problems with animal products. One is bacteria. If you eat animal products that are not cooked a lot, they can kill you. You can die. That's why, remember those kids at Jack in the Box that all died because the person didn't cook their little hamburger quite enough? You can also get viruses like bovine leukemia viruses. But they'll tell you, oh, don't worry. Yeah, it causes leukemia, but that's in cows. You're not a cow. You don't have to worry. You're a human. You're exempt from all laws of physics and thermodynamics and everything else. And that's just what they said about prions, the agents that cause mad cow disease, or in humans we call it Crutchfield-Jacob disease. It's like Alzheimer's and fast forward. And they used to tell you that, oh, don't worry, it won't be a problem for humans, until those 80 kids in England died from mad cow disease. And they said, okay, fine, we'll stop feeding offal to cows. Heavy metals, growth stimulants and hormones. We give lots of growth stimulants and hormones to animals, make them grow bigger, fatter, faster, make more money. Antibiotics, most antibiotics that are produced are fed to animals because they raise them in very inhumane quarters and they're sick, and so in order to make sure they get fatter and bigger and faster and don't drop dead before you can kill them, they give them lots and lots of antibiotics, which help raise antibiotic-resistant organisms. When you eat the meat, you get exposed to organisms. Eventually, you have organisms that no longer respond to antibiotics. Pesticides, much of which is spread on the feed that we give them and sprayed on the animals themselves. And biological concentration, this issue of biologically concentrated material. So lots of reasons to avoid animal products. Now some people say there's other reasons, about moral or ethical or spiritual reasons. They'll argue that it's not nice to take sentient creatures and torture them all their life and kill them and eat them.
It's not.
So I'm not making that argument, but I can certainly appreciate and understand that other people might. 93% of animal products, 93% of calories consumed by people in industrialized countries today come from either animal products, meat, fish, products, or dairy products, or pleasure trap chemicals, oil, sugar, flour, dairy. That means 7% still come from fruits and vegetables. I know AJ's an optimist, she's a vegan, and she says, well, there's still 7%, so let's keep hope alive. But of that 7%, 1/3 of it's one vegetable called potatoes, served almost exclusively as French fries and potato chips. So fruits and vegetables no longer make a statistically significant percentage of the diet of humans, which means they are the decoration of the plate.
Can you say what's biological concentration again?
Yeah, biological concentration means you take an animal and it eats something that maybe has some pesticides, herbicides, heavy metals, and that material biologically accumulates in its tissues day after week, after month, after year, till by the time you kill and eat that animal, you get its entire lifetime accumulation of toxic waste all in one mouthful. So instead of having to eat 300 pounds of materials like the cow did in order to biologically concentrate all that poison, you get the entire load in one meal. That's why a calorie of animal food may have as much as 1,000 times the concentration as a calorie of plant foods. Biological concentration.
Is that worldwide or US, did you say?
What?
That diet?
This is industrialized countries.
Okay.
Okay, not that much different. Now everybody's catching up to us. They're not quite there. They're catching up. Are people getting fatter? Which one's the vegan? Any idea? So tobacco still exceeds obesity as a cause of death and disability, but obesity is rapidly catching up, in part because the smokers are dying. Foods to include. So is there anything left? Now, 93% of calories come from meat, fish, fowl, eggs, dairy products, oil, salt, and sugar, which we say very, very rapidly. It's very important you learn to say it extremely fast. So when people say, well, what do you avoid? You say, well, I avoid meat, fish, fowl, eggs, dairy products, oil, salt, and sugar. Why do you have to say it so quickly? Because then it doesn't seem like you're giving up so much. And then when they say, well, what's left? You say, well, fruit, and then name them all. Apples, bananas, cucumbers, all the way down the list, and say them very slowly. Okay, so we include fruits, raw and cooked vegetables, nuts and seeds, and complex carbohydrates. Now, we classify foods into 3 categories. One is U, or unlimited. Fruits and vegetables, you eat what you want. Number 2, restricted. Healthy foods, but you have to be a little careful about the quantity. Things like nuts, seeds, avocado, and anything that's processed, like flours, juices, or dried fruits, etc. As soon as you process it, even if it's just drying the fruit or you're blending the, you have to be now realize you're capable of fooling your satiety mechanisms. You're designed to eat whole foods. Eat whole foods, you do fine. For example, if you just sit and eat oranges, how many oranges do you think you eat before you feel like you've had enough oranges and you don't want any more? 2, 3, 4. But 1 glass of orange juice has 6 oranges. So which is easier to overeat on, orange juice or whole oranges? It's the same thing. It's not like orange juice is the end of the world, but it's easy to overeat. It's easy to get, and plus the sugar goes in quicker. You don't have the fiber to buffer it. So the farther you process the food, the more trouble you're going to be in. Now, if caloric density isn't an issue, let's say, for example, if you're young and energetic, or you're fit, or you have a really high metabolic rate, and you don't have any weight issues, maybe you don't have to be as worried about whether something's turned into a rice flour rather than whole rice in terms of a pasta dish or something. Or maybe you're trying to increase caloric density because you're an athlete and you're burning 3,500 calories a day and you need to really get the food in. So you might purposely take the rice and turn it into a flour. You take the date, fresh date, turn it into a dry date, whatever, just to help get a little bit more density. But if those of us are trying to maintain or lose weight, we don't want to get too far away from whole foods. And so restricted means we quantify and limit the quantity of those foods. For example, nuts or seeds, generally we recommend about 1 ounce a day or less for those of the people that can eat nuts and do well with nuts, not more than that. Why? Because we're looking for around 15% to 18% of calories from fat. And if you eat more than that, it's very difficult to keep the numbers in line, keep the calories in line. So general rule of thumb, things like nuts or avocado, we would restrict the quantity. And the same thing if we're using flour products like a rice pasta or a tofu or anything that's been processed, we watch carefully and think about the quantity that we would eat of those foods, yes. And then N of earn is, no, you don't eat those, that's everything else. Everything you're
I don't mean to be nitpicky, but I need to understand this because in an earlier slide you said that flour was on the avoid list, yet we have had pasta 4 times here.
Flour's on the restricted list, not on the avoid list.
On an earlier slide.
The earlier slide was referring to white flour, you know.
But why is pasta okay but not bread or flour?
Well, bread, if it's coming, well, first of all, we're not using glutinous grains. Bread is often also served with oil, salt, sugar, other products. If you just make bread without anything else, it's like called matzah, and you know, you can get people to eat it on Passover, that's about it. So as far as pasta is concerned, pasta, like a rice pasta or something, is a restricted food.
It's processed. The other day you said don't you eat food with labels.
It's
it
a
has
highly
a label.
processed restricted food, and if weight loss or control is a goal, then we would restrict or eliminate that food. On the other hand, it might be very useful when you're trying to increase caloric density on people. Because, for example, if I just eat rice, you can only eat so much, but if you eat rice pasta, you can eat a higher amount of calories before satiation comes in. And so if the goal is to increase caloric intake, the use of processing can have an advantage. For those of us for the 90% of the population trying to lose weight, then you would want to restrict or limit those foods. Now the good news is for a lot of people that don't have eating related sensitivities, they can use some restricted foods like nuts, avocado, dried fruits without necessarily getting into weight or health related issues. So that's why we have the EARN. Unrestricted, restricted, no.
Never.
Yeah, never. None, not, nada.
Could you repeat the quantity you said of the nuts and seeds?
1 ounce a day, it's just a general rule. Remember, there's a difference between a 280-pound, 25-year-old male who's burning 4,000 calories a day as a heavy manual laborer and a 93-year-old woman who's relatively sedative, who's only living on 1,600 calories a day, or somebody like AJ that can get about 90 calories and maintain her weight. Okay? So, there are some people, particularly females, that it can apparently violate the laws of physics and thermodynamics. And it is remarkable.
And how many cashews do you eat a day out of your freezer?
Well, for me, I with cashews, it's interesting you should mention that. I don't have any trouble restricting. Like we have walnuts and almonds, and I have no trouble. I don't even get the allocation. With cashews, I like raw cashews. And if you put a bowl out, and I wasn't really careful, I might eat more than the 1 ounce or 18 cashews. So I realized early on that if I was going to not overeat cashews, I needed to quantify it. It was one of the few foods I have to quantify. So I will weigh out the 1 ounce of cashews, put the cashews back in the freezer, which is where we always store raw nuts, so they don't go bad, and I'll eat it. And I have a rule, and the rule says if I ever go back, no more cashews in the house. So I started that rule 32 or so years ago. We still have cashews in the house. And now many times I've been tempted to go back. When I'm going back, I'm thinking, oh, if I go back, I can never have cashews in the house, and it's not worth it. And so for me, that's allowed me to keep cashews in the house. Now, someday maybe I'll break down, and then we won't have any more cashews in the house.
Do you eat them by themselves or with things?
Always with greens, like I like celery or cucumbers or stuff like that, and possibly fruit too. So with almonds, I would never come up.
Right.
You know what I mean? You take your handful.
You know, Brazil nuts.
Yeah, one or two. That's enough. So, and I don't know why that is. I mean, that's just that everybody's a little different. There are some people like any nuts. Like you give them one nut and they go into a feeding frenzy.
Yep.
Yeah. And so you can't like even have them like in the house. There are people that can actually hear the nuts calling their name. It's like, eat me, eat me, eat me. And they have to eat it just to shut it up or they can't go to sleep. Some of my patients can hear them calling it from the grocery store down the street. They have special hearing. And they never hear the carrots call. Brussels sprouts don't have a voice. But highly processed foods, yes.
Going back to the pasta question from earlier, I'd also heard that with pasta, because you cook it in water and it absorbs the water, the caloric density lowers much lower than a regular processed
if you wanted to take the bread and soak it in water and get it all nice and juicy and stuff, it probably wouldn't be quite as a problem, and it also wouldn't be quite as appealing. Why? Because you'd lower the caloric density.
Right.
So soggy bread, just not quite the same as that nice hot loaf of sourdough, crunchy on the outside, soft on the inside. And they put it on the table. They put it on the table in the restaurant, and it's venting, and you open the napkin up, and there it is, and you have a piece or two or three, don't you? And soon, what do you notice about the bread that was in the basket?
It's gone.
It's all gone.
And you want more.
And you put, what do? You spread the naked basket open there and you push it towards the edge of the table. And you wait for that waiter to come by. And you're thinking, does he want a tip or not? And then finally the waiter shows up and says, oh, did you want some more bread? And first you have to do what? Act like you didn't know it was empty. Like, oh, sure, why not? And they bring you some more bread. So now, would you ever go into the same restaurant and say, excuse me, waiter, please bring me 3 large baked potatoes. I'd like to eat those before I order my dinner. Would you order 3 large and eat 3 large baked potatoes before you ordered your dinner? Why not? Because you'd be too full. Because 3 baked potatoes have about 500 calories and will completely fill up mechanically the human stomach. Okay, now, but that same 500 calories of bread only takes 1/3 of the stomach. Plenty of room left for greasy, slimy, fatty, processed food and alcohol. So you got to realize the same calories, and that's before you turn it into a butter boat. And you smear coagulated cow pus all over that bread. So it's, what do you think you're going to get fat on? Eating whole potatoes or eating bread? Yeah. So it doesn't mean that flour per se necessarily is the problem. And as you said, if you do pasta like a rice pasta, it's not the same thing as eating French bread. But it's still concentrated, so it's still very easy to overeat on, say, raw pasta versus rice, and rice is easier to overeat on even than, say, starchy vegetables, and starchy vegetables are easier to overeat on than steamed vegetables or salad. And so what we talk about is eat the salad first, the low-density food, and eat as much as you need to eat, so a big pound or so. Then you have your steamed vegetables. Then you have a serving of whatever. And then if you're still hungry, you go back and have another pound of salad. If you eat enough salad, there's not as much room left to try to overeat on
What is the
anything
caloric
else.
density of pasta? Do you happen to know it?
Well, it depends on the pasta and how
Right.
it's done, but you're looking at like any flour product, around 1,500 calories.
You said something that I never heard before. So you said it's easier to overeat on rice than starchy vegetables. Is that because it has a slightly higher caloric density?
Higher caloric density. It's a little bit less water concentration, which is essentially what
Because
you
I
get.
always wondered why, when it comes to potatoes, I get full so fast, but rice I seem to.
Right, yeah, it's a little easier to overeat on rice. Doesn't mean you can't use rice. Or
Right.
It's just the higher the caloric density, the easier it is to fully brain. Now, some people have really naturally sensitive satiety mechanisms. Like, for example, Dr. Lyle. This is a guy who would, when you have those little, he could have like a piece, when you have a little chocolate bar, he might break a piece off.
Oh my God.
And then he's like full. And then it would like sit in the cupboard. That's not me. I mean, if I was, I'd eat the thing with the package and all. Okay, so, yeah.
So nuts and, so we should have at least 1 ounce of nuts and seeds for
If
fat?
we include up to an ounce a day of nuts or seeds, the advantage that it's a very concentrated source of essential fatty acids, very concentrated source of nutrition. There's a certain satiation benefit of whole fat-based foods. It adds variety, so you can make like a dressing.
I was
You
just
can
thinking of the
take
dressing.
even a half an ounce of almonds ground into a powder, spread on just that as a very nice thing. It adds a little variety. On the other hand, if you're trying to lose weight, if foods are nuts are a trigger for you, sometimes nuts are a problem, but seeds may not be. So people might be able to have ground flax seeds, but they can't have, nuts, or maybe certain nuts. They're going to be a problem. Also, the more you process the nut, the harder it is. So if you have raw nuts, not so much problem. You toast them, dehydrate them, concentrate them. Now they're going to be more tasty.
Or nut butter.
What's more tasty? Or grind it into a thing, smear it up into yeah. So like, for example, walnuts. I never eat overeat walnuts because we pick them off our tree and then we shell them. And you pull this thing out and you chew them up. I mean, by the time you get through about 6 walnuts, you've got to go on with your day. It's like, how much time do you have? Whereas, if you turn those, if they're all shelled and ready to go, you might eat more. And if they're all ground into a little thing and you use a tablespoon, and you can see that the principle is the farther you process, the easier it is to fool your brain. Now, you have to be honest with yourself. Am I a person that's naturally easily satisfied? I'm not going to overeat. I may be able to have some of these concentrated convenience foods without gaining any weight or having any problem, without messing up our outcome data. That's fine. Okay. On the other hand, if you're one of those people that you have a little bit, you need to have a lot. If you're one of those people that bought the Pepperidge Farm cookies, but when you came home, you wondered how come they ripped you off because there was no cookies in the bag and didn't even remember eating them, those are not for you. Okay? You may find it a lot easier to just not have any temptation in the house, to have something in the cupboard calling your name. Okay? And also, some of you don't even have to eat the food if you just think about the food. You walk by the buffet table as a dress size. You know what I mean? It's women in general are energy conserving fat storage devices, biologically speaking. If you're a female, you have tons of estrogen and you're able to have babies. Okay, that's essentially you're designed to be able to store fat to survive a period of biological window called pregnancy. Men have testosterone. We don't have babies, thank God. And well, I say that because our species would have not survived.
That's true.
12 babies a year on the planet, that's it. Never a second birth, not even one time. And none of this business, like when women, they squat down in the field, have a baby, they're back picking in 20 minutes. Men, lifetime retirement, that's it. One baby, all we do is talk about, tell us the time you had the baby. Yeah.
I got a question about how many, let's say, cashews would make up 1 ounce?
Depends on if they're the large jumbo cashews. It's a small handful, so it's going to be about 18.
A small
It's
handful.
18 cashews.
When you say fool the brain, is that because toasted raw almond butter is more calorically dense and tastes better than raw? I mean,
It
I
tastes
don't.
better because it results in more dopamine stimulation because it's got a higher amount of calories per volume.
So that's what you mean by fooling the brain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as your brain's concerned, the higher the caloric density, the better, because the better chance you'll get enough to eat and not get eaten. Remember, all the skinny ones, they ain't gonna make it. The only ones that make it are the ones that get enough to eat and not get eaten. Not the polite ones. Oh, you first. No. They're the ones, go watch any wild animals, dogs, any of them. Watch them eat. Are they all like lining up and polite? No. The ones that reproduce are the ones that get enough to eat, and the ones that don't do so well, they're not passing their DNA on. I'll tell you that.
Question on that slide, please. Category 2, raw and cooked vegetables. Let's just say it was carrots or broccoli.
Yeah.
Are they not also complex carbohydrates?
Yes, they have complex carbohydrates, but they're a much lower caloric density, so it's 200 to 300 calories a pound, rather than say, you know,
Starch category or something.
yeah, 500 calories a pound, or 1,500 calories a pound for flour-based products, or nuts, or 25.
I'm ignoring the live audience, but this question is sort of good. Are some people able to eat more nuts and not gain weight due to genetic differences in how much fat some people can eat and not be fat?
Instead of absorbing their fat, they shunt it off into their colon, and they have fatty stools, and they don't absorb it well. A lot of people that have malabsorption syndrome, actually. Now, that doesn't mean that that's good for them to do. It just means that they're not necessarily going to get fat. They may still develop problems. Some people shunt a lot of cholesterol into their colon. So even if they're eating a greasy, slimy, vegetating flesh diet, they may not have high cholesterol levels. They may get colon cancer instead. But, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do something. You know, some people, like Caucasians, might be able to handle more alcohol exposure than other people that have less alcohol dehydrogenase and the ability to break down alcohol and have more vulnerability to alcoholism and other consequences. That doesn't mean that it's good for you. So how come we eat 3 times a day? Why don't we eat, say, once a day? What, just once? I mean, 3 times, all that, gosh, it's so much work. We could just do it once and be done with it. Or what about, why should we only eat 3 times a day? It's so much fun to eat. Let's eat 18 times a day, or 12 times a day. Why just 3 times a day? What's the deal? Well, basically, think about it. You have a container, right? You fill up the container. If you fill up the container with low-density foods, you get about 500 to 800 calories in the container. So how many calories do you need? A couple thousand calories a day, more or less, depending who you are. So you have to fill up the container enough times to get enough of this food. If you fill up the container with the kind of stuff we're talking about, you fill it up about 3 times a day. If you need more calories, maybe 4 times a day. If you're maybe lower metabolic rate, whatever, maybe you only need to fill it up twice a day. But you're basically filling up the container. Now, what if you fill up the container with oil and processed foods? And oh my gosh, remember the bread business versus the potato business. If you fill up this container with bread 3 times a day, you're going to get 4,500 calories a day. So that means you're going to have, you know, twice 2,000 calories a day extra, which means you can gain, you know, 2-3 pounds a week. You can gain 50 pounds, 100 pounds a year. You can become huge. So you wouldn't want to fill up the container with really concentrated foods all the time. And so what if I just have a little bit? I just have a little bit of bread and bacon in the morning, and I just have a little bit of cheese and alcohol at lunch, and I just have a little bit of, well, first of all, you add it up a little bit, becomes a lot. Second of all, let's say you're gaining a pound a week. Okay, that's only 3,500 calories. So that's only about 500 calories a day. 500 calories, that's a couple of Oreo cookies or whatever, you know. Well, over the year, of course, that adds up to be a lot, doesn't it? Okay, so if we fill up the container, is the time between breakfast and lunch the same as the time between lunch and dinner for most people? No, usually there's less time here. Not always, but if there is, maybe we go a slightly lower density, we have some fruit, maybe some oatmeal, a few flax seeds. Then we have a huge salad, a bunch of steamed vegetables, maybe a potato. Dinner, maybe we have another salad, vegetables, maybe a grain or a bean, something from the health promoting cookbook, the Bravo cookbook, or Katie May's new straight up cooking, or soon, AJ's new vegan SOS free cookbook that'll be coming up. So, we have any of those dishes. We fill it up 3 times a day, we get the calories we need, we get the vitamins, mineral, fiber, protein, we get the things we need, we avoid the dietary excess because we're eating low density food, so we're not fooling our brain. If we're fat, we lose weight. If you're a male, 3 pounds a week. If you're a female, 2 pounds a week. 50% less if you're a woman. Is that because women are not disciplined? No. No, because they're energy-conserving fat storage devices and they have estrogen. Yeah, that's why women have to work twice as hard for half the results. Get used to it. Okay, now, hey, I don't make up the rules. Okay, So what if you wanted to have dinner for breakfast and breakfast for dinner? Because maybe you get up early and you go to bed. Fine, do whatever you want. As long as overall you're getting large quantities of vegetable material. The biggest mistake I see people making, particularly on vegan diets, so they're not eating animal foods, they're eating oil, salt, and sugar. But people on vegan SOS-free diets, is they still sometimes don't eat enough vegetables. Raw and cooked vegetables should be, by volume, the bulk of your diet. It may not be by calories the bulk of your diet, but by volume, the bulk of your diet. So get enough vegetables in. When in doubt, you can always eat raw vegetables. And if you're really hungry, raw vegetables will take the edge off your hunger. But if they don't, that means it's not hunger, it's appetite. It's a special hunger, only satisfied by ice cream or peanut butter. Fruit, vegetables, starchy vegetables. Don't forget the squashes. There's so many great squashes. Kombucha squash, Hubbard, butternut. They're wonderful. You can bake them, you can steam them, you can blend them into soups. There's lots of different ways to serve them. They're very low anagenic. That is, most people don't have allergies to these foods. You can get a variety of them all year round. They grow well in the garden. They're cheap, they're fast, they're convenient, they're easy. Great taste and textures. And low caloric density. You're not getting fat eating squashes. There's beans and lentils. Okay, I'm going to do a cooking demo. You've had a lot of cooking demos here this week, but I'm going to do one that you'll remember. Okay, so if you want to know how to prepare a simple, quick, fast, easy meal, there's this stuff that comes in their own package. It's called fruit. In this case, we're doing bananas. And what you do is you take the banana and you peel it, and then you eat it. So the trick is don't eat the peel part. That doesn't taste so good. But you eat the inside. Okay? Shall we practice that?
No.
Okay, peel and eat it. Now I know some of you are thinking, but what? I want variety. I don't want to just eat bananas all the time. I want some difference, some variety in my diet. No problem. What you do is you take it the other way. And you peel it the other way. It's a completely different experience. If you have ever tried peeling a banana, it's different one way than the other. So maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday you peel it down, and then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday you peel it up, and now you have variety. Okay? Health Promoting Cookbook, the Bravo Cookbook, Katie May's new straight up.
Kathy Fisher.
Kathy Fisher, sorry. Kathy, where's Katie May's cookbook? Somebody needs to get
It's
it.
online.
It's online. She has,
Great.
Oh, it's online?
she has
She's an
four
Mexican.
PDFs of
Is it
different ones.
SOS free?
Yes.
Okay. Katie May's online, Kathy's straight up cooking. And of course, if you haven't read The Pleasure Trap, you should. This is a disturbing book. It'll tell you what you need to know, not what you want to hear. Okay. So now in 45 minutes, it was supposed to be 30, but anyway, 45 minutes, we have reviewed everything you need to know about how to eat and why to eat. It's not rocket science. What's the problem? The problem is we don't want to eat low-density, high-nutrition, simple foods. We want to eat tasty, highly concentrated foods that get the brain's dopamine cascade squirting out lots of dopamine. And when you give up the animal foods, and you give up the chocolate, and you give up the cheese, then you go to the next most concentrated food. We don't want to have rice. We want rice pasta. We don't want to have potatoes. We want to have
French fries.
Exactly, concentrated stuff. So what we're trying to do is give you a variety of foods that can be dressed up and made interesting, attractive, and flavorful, but not so concentrated that you're going to get into trouble. Some of you can't even eat some of the concentrated foods that we're giving you, like, for example, rice pasta. Some of you eat rice pasta, it's going to be hard for you to achieve your weight goals because you're just not going to be able to contain and control the quantity. If you can't contain and control the quantities, don't eat those foods. If you can't limit your portion, then don't eat those foods until you can. And if you can't, that's okay. You can have your potatoes, your squashes, your other stuff. But that's the big issue. We don't want to face reality, is that we can't all eat whatever we want, whenever we want it, and still be thin and healthy. And that's why all the books are like, well, eat whatever you want, whenever you want, and be thin, and just take this pill and do this thing, and it's bad, the vinegar, and it'll liquefy your... They tell you everything you want to hear. It's not true. What's true is you have to limit your caloric density to the point that is appropriate for you. You're not going to get rid of it with exercise. It's not stress. It's not because you're emotionally damaged. You're not going to psychotherapeutic it away. It's going to be about controlling what you put in your mouth. Now, granted, let's say you have a bunch of emotional scar tissue because your life sucked and people didn't treat you nicely. Do you think it's harder to make good decisions? And yeah, of course it is. And that doesn't mean psychotherapy and other things can't be helpful. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that that's not what the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue is that, for example, you take a screwed up person who was sexually abused, life was sucked, all kinds of terrible things you can imagine. Put them in an environment where there's nothing to eat but whole natural foods. Do they lose weight?
Yes.
Yeah. Doesn't matter how screwed up you are if there's no choice. The problem is, what if there is a choice?
You'll choose.
It's easier, it's harder to make the good choice. If you have all the things going for you, it's a lot easier to make good decisions than if you don't have anything. So I'm not saying that there's not a reality there too, but the problem is the diet. And I see that every day because people come here where it's relatively easy to make good decisions and it's a little bit more effort to make poor decisions. You gotta walk all the way to the bakery or something. And people generally make really good decisions in the control. So why is it that same person, that same emotionally screwed up, damaged person in a controlled, supportive environment can do really well? And yet when they walk outside to the real world, they have so much issues. Is the food didn't change, but their ability to deal with it. I believe most of it's channel factors and tension systems. Most of it's effort. For example, if you go home and you're in a situation where somebody else is doing all the work, like they're doing the shopping and food preparation, and all you have to do is make your decisions, and there's not temptations calling your name, do you think people comply better?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Why do you think that so many of our male patients do actually quite well? Because often there's somebody else doing all the work. Yeah. Yeah, that happens a lot just because of traditional roles. A lot of times they're not used to actually having to do anything. And so, makes it easier. But let's say you don't have a husband or wife that's waiting to wait on you hand and foot and take care of it. Sometimes it's worth delegating that out. You're doing it now when you go out to a restaurant or you buy highly processed foods. You're paying other people to do your food preparation for you. What about doing it directly? What about hiring a college student to come in once or twice a week for a few hours and take the recipes out of the cookbook that you have and have them make that stuff up for you? That would cost you less than eating out in restaurants.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not economic. You can't say, well, I can't afford that. Well, you're paying for it now. You're paying for some manufacturer to process your packaged crap full of salt and sugar. What about actually doing it directly? Or maybe you like cooking, and that's not a problem. Maybe it's worth delegating some of the other responsibilities you don't like. Maybe it's worth hiring somebody to come in and help you with other chores, housekeeping chores, whatever it is you don't like, so that you can spend more time focusing on the things that you do like, okay, that you don't like. So being smart about how to delegate resources, might be an important issue. I know one of my patients had a very high-paying job. She drove 2 hours a day to this job she hated, working with people she despised for a company she detested to make money. What she ultimately decided to do was get a job closer to home. She got rid of 2 hours of commute, spent the time with exercise, food preparation, made less money, and was a hell of a lot happier. So sometimes you have to decide, what the priorities are, what you're going to do. Now, preferably get the high-paying job close to home too, be even better. But the point is, we all make decisions, and a lot of people will make really crappy decisions. And sometimes that's where it's good to talk to somebody like Dr. Lyle or somebody that will tell you like it is and help you, I'll give you another example. Sometimes people spend a lot of energy dealing with people they really don't like. Sometimes they're like related to them. It's a problem. So sometimes you can change the nature of your relationships to being more productive and supportive of what you actually need. And that's okay too sometimes. And you can do it in a loving and supportive way. I'll give you an example. When I would never forget this woman, terrible relationship with her mother. Her mother, though, was a nut. I mean, she was just disturbed and couldn't help it. She was hurtful and said terrible things, and it was just awful. So this young woman finally realized she just couldn't deal with her mother anymore, but she couldn't fight the guilt, and she just couldn't. So anyway, Dr. Lau helped her. What she ultimately did was she changed her relationship with her mother to mostly one of communication through writing. And so she wrote her letters every day. They ended up having a great relationship because the mother, when she was writing, had a little more impulse control and didn't write hurtful and harmful things. So she didn't have the ability to do that in person, but she did have to do it. So they were able to communicate and change the nature of the relationship. I think everybody was a lot happier. Certainly the patient was a lot healthier. And so there's an example where you don't necessarily have to, disappear, but maybe there's an answer to solving a relationship. People that have trouble with their bosses, get a different boss. I mean, sometimes that's or maybe you can manipulate the boss into behaving better. And that's where Dr. Lau comes in really good, to help you figure out what can you do to get, asshole in line, basically, so that life can work better. But it's too important. If you're going to spend like a third of your life, you don't want to be in an unhealthy happiness compromise. I mean, you're going to be dead soon. You're 500-600 months, you're dead. That's it. You have a limited amount of time left, and that's if you do everything right. So in the limited time you have left to live, it's not worth, giving it up to the energy vampires. My attitude is. So figure out, like if you knew you were going to die, would you do things differently? Well, you are. It's inevitable, guaranteed. It's only a question of how, when, and how well. So since you know you're dying and you're on the way out, and you've got a limited number of months left, do the things that you think would be important. I can't tell you how many people are given terminal diagnosis. They're told, you got cancer, you're going to be 6 months, 2 years, whatever. Completely change their lives. And they'll tell you it was the best thing that ever happened to them, especially when they got healthy and didn't die. Oh, and by the way, that is one of the requirements of all of our patients now. If you are an oncology patient, if you have cancer, we do require you outlive your oncologist at the very least. You don't have to live forever, but you do have to outlive your oncologist. So the good advice is always pick a very young oncologist. Okay, what else were we talking about?
I have a question about refeeding.
Okay.
If you refeed, and if you're refeeding and everything's working well, your bowel movements and all that kind of stuff, why can't you go a little faster?
Yeah, because one of the most important parts of fasting is eliminating the materials that are mobilized during fasting, and that happens during initial refeeding. It takes about half the length of the fast, so you can go quicker, but you will reduce the net effectiveness of reestablishing normal gut flora. You'll detoxification, mobilization process, eliminating. So it turns out we are going faster. For example, Dr. Esser would require the length of the fast for controlled refeeding, and probably that's better. We, in our desire to try to make things more practical, reduce that to half the length of the fast refeeding, and we're getting away with it, and we've done it for 3 decades now. And I think it's a reasonable minimum, but it's a minimum. And so to speed that up even further, I think would be a clinical mistake. So that's why we use the protocol we do. Now it is true, some of the very long fasts, the 30, 40-day fast, we do, depending on how people go, sometimes we do step them up a little bit faster than what the formal protocol is. So the formal protocol is just an average, it's designed to kind of meet most people's needs. But the general protocol we use, half length of fast, it holds up well. We very, very rarely get into trouble. Could people go a little faster, still get the net benefit? Probably, but there's good justification for doing it. We'll know a little bit more soon because we're going to be getting objective biomarkers back, and we'll be able to start actually telling. Unfortunately, for patients, it may turn out that we're going a little too fast, in which case we're going to be obligated to kind of dial it back. Which I hope not, because it's hard enough as it is, but we'll find out.
Thanks.
A couple questions about weight. One is there's Dr. Clapper suggested that for weight loss, eat your fats, cashew, or your salad dressings like on the salad bar with your greens, and not with your starches. But of course, if you're eating, and on your sample menu, right, you had like the salad bar and the avocado dressing, and then the baked potatoes. So that's your fats and your starches.
Well,
and then the second,
the basic issue here, though, is the fats will be absorbed much more readily as fat if you get enough calories so that you don't need to oxidize the fat. So in other words, fat tends to store as fat. So if you're trying to lose fat, generally less fat is better than more fat as far as weight loss, because fats are so efficiently utilized. However, if your overall caloric intake is appropriate, whether you're including small amounts of fat or not, you're still going to be losing 2 pounds of fat a week. So, or in the case of a male, 3 pounds of fat a week.
So make sure you eat your greens.
So I think a lot of these things about food combining end up becoming people that are not going to be limiting their total calories. This is a little tool that helps them, do a better job. It's also like limiting the feeding window. The hours of eating will help you reduce total intake. So different tricks to help you deal in the quote real world. Frankly, I don't see people that are eating this diet, eating the salads first, whether they include fat or don't have fat, that are not able to achieve their weight
So
goals.
if you're eating this, and you're putting the cashew dressing on it.
And here's how you can tell. If you're losing your 2 to 3 pounds of weight, it's not a struggle, don't worry about it. If you're, so let's say you're only losing 1 pound a week and you're a little bit impatient and you're eating right, well fine, then you can go and turn up the heat a little bit and just pull the fat out, or don't combine the fat differently so that you facilitate additional weight loss. My guess is you're going to find it's not going to be a problem for you. You're going to be able to achieve your weight goals if the diet is strictly followed, you get enough sleep, and you do exercise. Why do people not lose weight? They do not sleep enough, and they do not eat enough. Those are the 2 biggest issues with weight. They don't sleep enough, so their metabolic rate slows down. They have fatigue. They don't have the energy. They don't want to exercise. They don't have the effort, and they're trying to stimulate themselves because they're exhausted all the time with eating concentrated foods. You have to sleep enough to wake spontaneously feeling refreshed. And you have to sleep in a cool, dark, and quiet place so you get good quality of sleep. Number 2, you have to eat enough. People are fat because they do not eat enough low-density foods. They have to eat more salad, more steamed vegetables. You show me a fat person, and I'll show you a person that's not willing to eat enough salad, steamed vegetables, almost inevitably.
There you go.
It's basically, that's what it comes down to. So you want to lose weight, you got to eat more. You want to lose weight, you got to sleep more. And it would be good to get a little exercise too. But the big thing is eating more and sleeping more. And now what do most people think? Oh, I got to sleep less. I'm sleeping my life away. I've got to eat less. I've got to limit my intake and put myself in constant biological stress. Forget about it. Sleep more. Eat more. Get some exercise. What you'll find is the weight's going to become a secondary issue. You will lose the weight. Now, will it be quick and easy?
No.
Hell no. It's not. Sometimes you can only lose 100 pounds a year rate. I know, isn't it frustrating? I mean, it should be like 100 pounds a week. I ate good for a week. I should be off 80 pounds at least. I mean, yeah.
I know my husband and I gave up caffeine, coffee.
Congratulations.
And we've been fasting. We've been sleeping a lot less, and we wake up really refreshed, like a.
Without the poisons in your system, you may not need as much
Will that
sleep.
continue, or is that just a fasting
No,
thing?
you may find you need a little less sleep. Who needs less sleep? Older versus younger. People that are under less stress versus more stress. People that dissipate their stress with exercise. People that are stress donors rather than recipients. I say stress is like Christmas. It's better to give than receive. So be generous. So if you're a stress donor, you may not need as much sleep as if you're a stress recipient. Okay? So there's lots of things you can do to reduce. People that meditate don't need to sleep as much. People that have really cool lives and get to engage in fun activities. I'll bet you that people that work at TrueNorth Health Center don't have to have as much sleep as people that work at Kaiser Permanente, or McDonald's or whatever it is. So.
I remember Seventh-day Adventists had a credo, and that is to eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper. And so it isn't really the amount of fat that you're eating as much as when you're eating it.
Well, I think that there is probably some issues around eating, but mostly it's about what you're eating. So if you eat breakfast like a healthy king and eat your fruits and grains, and then you eat your lunch and your dinner like healthy poppers and whatever, I think you're going to be fine. But it's not going to matter how you manipulate your food if what you're eating is greasy, fatty, slimy, processed, dead, decaying flesh. You're going to still pay the price.
Sure about water. I mean, get more sleep, eat more. Why not drink more water? Because don't we heat up the water to expel it at 98.6 degrees?
Well, there's probably a little thermogenesis that goes along with digestion of anything, food and water itself. But I wouldn't see drinking water as a primary weight loss tool. But, and too much water can be an issue. You're not a plumbing system, so sodium depletion. But, definitely drinking abundant water is helpful. It also may have some satiation mechanisms. Sometimes people get hungry because they're dehydrated rather than necessarily hungry. A lot of people they eat when they're angry because they're misinterpreting that pain. They feel relief from the pain of anger with eating because it stimulates dopamine production. Like women will tell me sometimes they only eat chocolate when their husband makes them mad. And I say, okay, well, what you do is you sit him down next time he makes you mad and give him the chocolate and say, you eat this and I'm not leaving till it's all gone. Well, now let's think about it. He's the one making you mad. Why should you suffer? Make him suffer. Because why is he not one of my patients?
I wanted to ask you about cooking these potatoes in the oven, like pieces of potato, and they get brown. Is that bad because of acrylamides? Yeah,
the acrylamide is increased. Now, it pales in comparison to French fries and potato chips and all that. But the browning is probably not that great, the caramelization and the acrylamide formation. On the other hand, if you look at baked potatoes, acrylamide concentration at maybe 200 or 300 units compared to 15,000 for French potato chips or something, we have to get a little bit careful here. Is it an actual measurable risk factors? Potatoes cooking in the oven, baked potatoes at 400 degrees are still cooking at 212 degrees. The only way you increase the temperature of cooking is with pressure cooking, where you go to about 250. So you're cooking at 212. There are more acrylamides with browning and caramelization. I wouldn't, go out of my way to be trying to maximize caramelization but again, it's different. Animal food caramelization versus plant-based foods. I haven't seen any compelling evidence that anything you're doing with vegetables is necessarily a problem if there's not oil and other stuff added. Maybe we'll find there is, but
Lightly brown would be okay.
Not likely.
We all have people that we have good relationships with, that we really love and care about.
Yes.
Who are very sick.
Okay, so we got people that we love but are very sick, and they don't want to hear it. Like, for example, how many of you know alcoholics? Okay, so we pretty much, and even if you don't know them, you do, believe me. And if you look at your alcoholic and say, I really love you, and you know how your life sucks? It's because you were drunk. Will they go, oh my God, it's the alcohol? I had no idea. Oh, thank you so much. I won't drink again. Is that your expectation going up to an alcoholic? So why do you think you're going to go up to a person addicted to the artificial stimulation of dopamine in their brain instead of alcohol from highly processed foods, and they're going to go, oh, you mean I'm fat and sick because I eat like a pig? Oh, I love you so much. Thank you. I'm going on a vegan SOS-free diet. Or are they going to tell you to mind your own effing business? Okay, so you can't be necessarily... Now, if they ask, then you have an obligation to answer only what they ask. And use Dr. Lyle's strategies, because he'll tell you how to do it where you can go along and get along and make it your issue, not their issue. And you know what I mean? You don't become a born-again natural hygienist and shove it down their throat and think you're going to be successful. It's not going to work that way. You can set a good example. You can be supportive. You can answer what's asked. You can share resources. You can have them call me. I'll talk to them for you. But you got to be a little careful, because if you activate their informational immune system, then they can't hear anything you're saying. They can't hear you. They don't want to hear you. When they want to hear you is usually when they're suffering and in crisis point, and maybe then they'll listen. And it happens with alcoholics. It happens with when they're, their second tumor recurrence and whatever. But so it's mostly answering what's asked, and it's only usually asked when they're witnessing your success. And then you only answer what they ask, or you give a resource. You say, well, I read this book, I don't know, see what you think. That's it, you're done. Now if they come back to you and say, I read that book, and how did you do that? Well, I did this, and here, that's it. You don't need them to agree with you. You just need them to tolerate you, and you need to do the same. They don't need to change their diet just because you know that they'd be healthier and happier. On the other hand, if they get that, by example and by infusion and by... Now, let's say you're trying to manipulate husband. Let's say you're married to a guy who happens to be a good guy. You don't want to kick him to the curb. But he's, on a poor diet. So what are the little manipulative things that you can do? One thing you could do is get everything out of the bathroom except some kind of health, like little book or health reference. Like put a Dr. McDougall book in there, or the Pleasure Trap. Because, there's nothing else to read. They're going to read that. So that's one way. One of my patients told me she got her husband to quit smoking. He had been a lifelong smoker. She came home from here. She said, dear, I really respect, I know you love smoking, and I wouldn't dream of trying to get you to stop. But he smoked outside. He was very respectful. He didn't expose her. She wasn't being exposed to it. And she said, but if you're going to keep smoking, I'd like you to do one thing. What's that, Terry? She said, I'd like you to dramatically increase your life insurance. Because with my next husband, I want to have a really nice standard of living. You know, he said every time he went to have a cigarette, he pictured his wife with another man. It drove him crazy. He quit smoking.
Yes.
Wow.
So, but it was, you know, if you're an alcoholic and you come home and say your mate is a casual drinker, do you think it's unreasonable to ask your mate, Jared, could you just have your beer when you're away, not at the house, not have it around the house, because drives, you know, I have trouble. Do you think that's an unreasonable request? No. So is it unreasonable? Let's say you have weight issues and you say, Jared, would you mind having your processed foods and stuff away, and when at home we keep it, otherwise I'm really tempted. Would you, or if you're going to have processed food, could you put it in the garage in a locking cabinet where I don't have the key because I just can't resist it? Is that an unreasonable kind of request? No, most reasonable people say, okay, Joe, you know, I can go along with that. You're not telling them to change their behaviors, you're just asking to modulate it to try to accommodate your disability, your limitation. One of my patients found a solution to the meat issue. She was a moral, ethical, spiritual vegan. Her husband was a hunter meat eater. Okay, so there was a conflict, but she loved him. He was a great guy. And she said, dear, and she traditionally had done all the cooking, but it really bothered her, grilling the cooked dead animal and all that stuff. So she came back and she said, look, I'm going on this dietary change. I'm going to continue to do all the meal preparation I'm going to make, but I'm not going to do the animal food. So you have all the animal food you want, but you have to do that, and I'll do everything else. And he said, okay. So first week, got the barbecue out, the spare ribs and the thing and the grill and the thing. She said by the second week, it was past the lentil loaf. Because the energy conservation mechanism, he was going to go out and cook and grill. That wasn't worth it. So he ended up, and now he's like an ardent vegan. Yeah. It's really funny. No more hunting, just, you know, never pushed it, never shoved it. He just, because he started feeling better and, you know, things started working and, you know. So the, sometimes the slow, steady, subtle is more effective, especially with males. We're like dogs, you know, you reward the positive, you punish the negative. It's not, we're not that complex. We're energy conserving devices. If you make it really easy to do certain things, and it's a little bit more effort to do the bad thing, just sheer laziness will eventually drive us to do more of the good thing. And again, we can always go out and get that barbecue, whatever, and have indigestion for a couple days or whatever. You're not restricting, you're not limiting, you're not directing. You're just asking for help, which is create an environment that's conducive to you being healthy and happy. Okay?
Can you address concerns about caffeine, coffee, tea?
Yeah, well, caffeine is a highly addictive nervous system stimulant. They used to put cocaine in Coca-Cola. They found a better drug that's called caffeine. What happens when you stop drinking caffeine? What happens to our patients? Severe drug withdrawal. Okay, headaches, withdrawal. What do you get, headache and withdrawal if you stop eating carrots for a week? Now, why do you think you get so ill with caffeine withdrawals? Because it's a very powerful drug. It causes palpitations and heart arrhythmias and all kinds of increased endogenous cholesterol production, all kinds of problems. Ask anybody with gastritis or gastric ulcer disease, how does it feel to drink coffee and stuff? Nasty. It's just as nasty on you. It's just your body's using up its reserves to try to buffer you from this highly addictive stimulant. It has a 17-hour half-life, so the coffee you drink in the morning is still impacting the quality of your life at night. It screws you up more than you realize. And so we recommend don't be a drug addict. You don't want to snort cocaine, you don't want to drink alcohol, and you don't want to take caffeine. Stop it. That's all.
Okay, so I get what you just said. What if it actually you enjoy it, but you're not addicted? I mean, you
well,
can
what
take
if you're
it
like
up
you're
here
just
and-
a one line of cocaine? You're not actually an addict. You can quit any time. You just like the way it makes you feel.
No, I'm saying you shouldn't have it every day.
I don't have wine every day. I just like the taste. I like it. It's not the alcohol. If you're an addict, you know, do you think everybody admits it? It was Mark Twain, the famous American philosopher, that said denial is not just a river in Egypt.
You don't have any effects of it at all. You
How
just enjoy
fat,
it from
how
time to
sick
time.
do you want to be? That's all. So yeah, can people get away? People get away with all kinds of stuff. And certainly caffeine, 90% of Americans use caffeine. And because they're sleep deprived, they have to use caffeine just to be able to function. They get up in the morning, they can't even function without taking a highly stimulating nervous system stimulant. Now, if you stop the caffeine, what do? You have to get more sleep. So one of the things that caffeine does is it prevents you from being forced to do the thing that's going to keep you alive, and so that you don't find yourself unable to talk or move, lying in some nursing home bed, waiting for them to change your diaper dependent on everybody around you when you're an older person. So how good do you want the last 20 or 30 years of your life to be? My attitude is let's get rid of the things we know compromise health, focus on the things that do. If you get there and you don't like being fit, healthy, and happy, and sleeping well, and having all these issues, you can always go back to drinking coffee and slipping up alcohol and all that other stuff. Decaf is an interesting thing because it does get rid of one of the nasties, which is the caffeine, with benzene often or other chemicals they use to decaffeinate. But it's got 2,000 other chemicals in there too, none of which are that good. Maybe not as bad as caffeine or as effective. That's why people don't like decaf as much as they do.
What about Chicino?
About, yeah.
Chicino.
Which is the Chicino?
It's a substitute. It's like a
Is it
grain
the roasted
substitute.
grain?
Yeah,
substitute? Yeah, because something's less bad doesn't exactly make it good, but it may be far less bad than the other stuff. There's nothing good about roasted grains drunk as a beverage. Even herbal teas, powerful alkaloids in most of these, but if you eat the plant, if you can eat the plant raw, like you can chew on peppermint, you can probably drink the tea and not get into too much trouble. So your very mild herbal teas that don't have chemicals and other crap used, maybe you get away with that. But you can also drink water. It's actually quite good if you try it.
Yeah, I use Jeff Novak's fast foods to cook my vegetables. When I cook the vegetables, does that mean I'm getting less water when I eat them?
Well, what vegetables are so high in water content that no matter how you're preparing them, I think you're still going to be just fine.
Okay, I'm
It's
just want to make sure.
not an issue.
Because, I try to drink 8 waters a glass of water a day, but then sometimes I just don't want to drink all that water.
Understood, but you just don't need to drink 8 glasses of weight when you're eating all this high water content fruits and vegetables. And I have to say that in general, I really like Jeff Novak. And if you look at his materials, he's got his videos out here. He does a great job. I think he's about more right on than just about anything. I've known Jeff for 25 years at least.
Well, I got all his videos.
And we're constantly arguing about every little point. He sent me criticisms this morning. I said something wrong that he's helping me fix. So.
What did you say that was wrong?
I was saying, son, I gotta go look at my email. I was talking about something and I didn't get it exactly precisely right. And he absolutely was all over me. He's really good about that. Anytime I get even slightly, he's like...
That's what I hate about emails. Somebody interprets your message differently than...
Yeah, no, but he was right. I mean, I was like, oh, God dang it. In fact, that's the biggest reason I try not to make mistakes now, because Jeff always finds out about it.
Aren't you glad he's not your wife?
Oh, no, my wife she's a little bit different. She knows, my wife is 95%, so she's right at least 95% of the time. So she just says it and I don't argue with her. Like, I know better. I've learned that she won't say it unless she's right. She's really tricky that way. She doesn't just say stuff to say stuff. When she says it, she's thought it through. And so you can argue with her, but you don't pay the price. So I don't argue with her.
I'm worried about if there's salt in any water. I mean, does tap water have salt in it?
Yeah, there's a lot of purified water is purified with salt.
How about reverse osmosis?
No, you should be able to get, the best water is distilled water.
Distilled?
Yeah, that's what we advocate. If you need a countertop distiller, go on our website. We've got the best one there, that pure water countertop distillers. You can also get reverse osmosis with filters, and you change your filters.
Would that take the salt out?
Yes, you can get different filtration systems to remove sodium. If you go on our website, under the articles, there's an article on water filtration, all the different things you can do, the strengths, the weaknesses. It's a good article. Water is your water safe to drink? It's a good detailed article.
So those machines where you pay like a quarter to fill up and they say reverse osmosis, would they have?
It depends on how good the filters are, and but they'll usually have an analysis, so they'll show you what the issues are.
If you buy distilled water?
If you buy steam distilled water, you do not have any sodium.
What about alkalized water?
Well, that's basically like the Kagan water systems, the $6,000. It's basically a perfectly reasonable filter system that you pay a ridiculous amount to add baking soda back, essentially. So, yeah.
Is it a myth then about the distilled leaching?
Yeah, that was done by the filter people. So the idea that water's hungry and it's going to somehow suck the minerals out of your body through the one-way gradient of your intestinal mucosa and pull it out is just, unfortunately, not a lot of support to that. Well, drink purified water. I don't care. It doesn't have to be distilled, but anything. You just want H2O. If your atmosphere wasn't polluted, rainwater would be distilled water, okay? You just need pure water. If you go to Home Depot, you can get good filtration systems cheap too that'll filter most of the stuff out. You want the best water? Fractional steam distillation. That's the best water.
I know you talked about sleep, and I also went off caffeine this time,
Congratulations.
so I hope it lasts forever. But if people have,
it's guaranteed to last until you take caffeine.
Exactly. I feel something like fibromyalgia. Do you need a little more sleep than the average person, and if so, like
Well, you
how
need
many hours?
you need better quality sleep. And the problem is with people, if you take a person, like they've done this with healthy medical students, deprive them of non-REM deep sleep, and within a few days they have the symptoms of fibromyalgia.
Oh my God.
So one of the theories is you can actually induce fibromyalgia by not getting enough non-REM deep sleep. And so if you want to get better quality sleep, sleep in a cool, dark, quiet place, exercise appropriately, eat a vegan, SOS-free diet, and don't have any stress in your life.
Is there a number of hours I should try?
Enough that you could wake spontaneously feeling refreshed. Like if you're waking up feeling like you need caffeine, you didn't get the quality of sleep you need. And the trick is going to bed earlier, not necessarily sleeping later.
Well, that's my big problem.
Yeah.
I'm a night owl. But here I get about 8 hours of sleep and I feel pretty good. So
that's a good sign.
And just stay here.
People may need between 8 and 10 hours when they're healing. Maybe later you won't need as much.
Okay.
But you have to get however much you need to recover your sleep debt. And the fact that you're getting 8 hours here is a really good sign, because this isn't necessarily the very easiest place to always sleep. Okay, we've got limitations. You're jammed in with 67 other people in a relatively small space. But the fact you are means you're pretty much doomed to success if we can get your home environment cool, dark, quiet, not have dogs jumping on top of you.
So it's better to go to bed like at 10 or 11 than 12.
Earlier, and then waking at your natural wake time. Yeah.
I always thought 10 o'clock was late for sleeping.
Well, it depends, how late you're going to sleep, and how some people, like for example, there's differences. My wife and I eat the same diet, but she definitely needs more sleep. And so, she goes to bed a little bit earlier than I do. And then the trick is I've become a master at getting into bed without waking her. and I can do that, and that's amazing actually, because we have, because she's a really light sleeper. I'm a heavy sleeper. You do. Nothing wakes me up. But I've gotten it down where you do it during, and I can get in, and she never doesn't wake up. And so she can get an extra hour and a half sleep. Otherwise, what would happen is I would go to bed and wake up an hour and a half earlier, and I have to lay there and not move.
He had fibromyalgia for 19 years, and he was sleeping 10 hours a night.
But not getting quality sleep, apparently.
He'd be gone. No one can wake him up. He could sleep on a park bench. But, 8 days of water fasting, it was completely gone.
Right.
And he hardly slept.
How much sleep
during
now
the
do you have to
fast.
have?
I still do like 7, 8 hours.
Yeah, so the point is you just save 2 hours a day by getting healthier. So now you have 2 hours you can spend exercising, eating good, making the world a better place, whatever.
But, and also, part of the way I got fibromyalgia was because I was kept awake for days at a time, and by the authorities. And so the third time through that, and had my ligaments and tendons ripped, stuck in a stress fishing cage. It really worked effectively to create fibromyalgia.
Yeah, I would suggest you not have that kind of stress anymore. It's not health producing. Coffee. I've never gone out and had a drink or used a drug. I've been vegan since I was 16, and I still get there's still contamination occasionally with sodium. It's hard to completely be free of contaminated sodium, but as far as some things like oil and stuff are pretty easy to avoid. Sometimes salt, even like if you're you get a steamed vegetable dish, sometimes you'll find that you got exposed to sodium. It's just very tricky. Fortunately, I'm not salt sensitive, so not a big issue.
What happens if you're going on a cruise? I know Jennifer goes on a cruise.
Yeah, we do no trouble with cruises because we call ahead and we explain what we want, and we're really insistent upon it. And they'll bring out big platters of steamed vegetables, baked potatoes. By the end of the cruise, all the people from around the tables are asking them, where do they get that? How do I get that? Because it's actually quite appealing. And then sometimes they'll even have a dish or two that you can get that's edible. But mostly, we just get them to prepare what we need. When we travel, a lot of times we get a place with a kitchen, so so we make our own food. Saves a lot of money, and plus you can get what you want. Traveling is always a problem. Every hotel now has an instant oatmeal maker. They call them coffee makers, they're not really. And there's these places called grocery stores, and you can go in and get stuff. You can go into like a lot of restaurants. If you go into a Thai restaurant, order off the side dishes. You can get a side of steamed vegetables, a side of rice noodles, a side of brown rice, and for like $6 you get a whole table full of food. It's like it's great. And the other person orders the greasy dead thing at $16, and you got the whole. It's great. And you call ahead. You can ask the chef. First of all, if you call a nice restaurant and you say, look, we'd like to bring our people there, but we have a person in our group that's a nut and needs a vegan SOS. Can you do that? What are they going to say? No, we don't want your money. We don't want your kind here. Go away. Don't come here. No, they say, well, sure, we can. And you talk to the chef and you say, I just need a big platter of steamed vegetables and a few baked potatoes and a big bucket of salad. Can you do that? Yeah, that's great. No problem. In fact, sometimes you'll get a really nice, healthy meal. Now, granted, sometimes the first time you go in, you want, can I get steamed vegetables plain? Sure, and it comes up covered with cheese. And you say, oh, I wanted steamed vegetables plain. Oh, well, we won't charge you for it. Yeah, correct. I get them to repeat it. And then when they bring it, then they see it and they go, oh, yeah, that's nice. And then they go get it the second time. Now, sometimes also, I remember we had a Chinese restaurant we went to one time, and they had like brown rice in the menu, and I said, I just wanted a big platter of steamed vegetables plain, no sauce, no salt. Can you do that? Oh, I don't know. And so they went back, and the chef came out and said, oh, no, you no eat. I said, no, you no eat. No fat, no flavor. I said, no, we eat. Listen, now we go into that restaurant, and they don't bring a menu. They just, oh, yeah, we know. No fat, no flavor. All you have to do is give the waiter a big enough tip that they never forget you, or your grandkid names, or anything. And you walk in, and then you know you've done it because they're getting you in their station. Oh, yeah, okay, go. Your station. They remember you forever. That's all they care about. They don't care what you eat. They care. Come in, leave a tip, go away. That's it, really, honestly. And if you come in, eat, go away, leave a big tip, they will remember you and they will take care of you and they will bring you whatever it is you want, even if it has no flavor.
Yeah, question. Does a plant-based diet, does it have any effect on epilepsy that you know of?
Yes. In fact, interesting enough, epilepsy, one of the original treatments for epilepsy was fasting.
Really?
Yeah, because the ketosis state tends to inhibit seizure activity. And people that have epilepsy that are on a healthy diet tend to do better, but it may not be a cure for the problem. So epilepsy can have different causes, and so some epilepsy responds, others doesn't. Not always possible to predict exactly who's who. But definitely there's a strong dietary tradition about manipulating epileptic seizure activity with dietary manipulation.
Like fasting.
Well, fasting and maintaining ketosis, tends to be anti-seizure.
I have a friend with plantar fasciitis.
Yes.
Would fasting help, and how long, on average, would you suggest?
Well, the fasting duration would depend on their overall health, not specifically plantar fasciitis. And like all inflammatory conditions, fasting and the rest that's associated with fasting can often be helpful. But also stretching the calf muscles, doing Graston technique and cross-fiber manipulation of the foot. There's a lot of, using orthotics, there's a lot of ways to help the mechanical as well as the chemical parts of plantar fasciitis. The ones we see are the ones, they've done all the therapy and it didn't work. And now we do bracing, fasting, combine all that together, and often it is successful. I have to say most plantar fasciitis can be treated outpatient without fasting, but for the most difficult cases, that's why they say our sign should say TrueNorth Health Center, the last resort. I want to get one of those signs from the Environmental Protection Agency that says toxic waste dump. That would be kind of cool, but I don't know, the neighbors might object. Yeah. Yes.
I wonder if you could comment on the right weight, and specifically, like, there's this rule of thumb, you've probably heard of it, like for women 5 feet, 95 pounds, and beyond that, like another 4 pounds. And so my mom actually miraculously, I convinced her because she has colitis to go to the McDougall program, but my sister kind of works against me because she, for typical reasons. And she gets just goes bananas. Like, you know.
Well,
she
it's not
says-
really absolute weight, because it depends on how much muscle mass you have. You can have the same woman being 20 pounds different weight and still being an optimum weight, depending on how much muscle mass. So you're looking at percent body fat, you're looking at analysis. I can guarantee, though, most women know if they're maintaining more weight than they're comfortable with. You know, mostly it's not like a big mystery for them. And if people, a lot of times it's much more of a problem with men that are worried about being thin, even though that might be healthier for them than women. Most women don't mind being thin. Now, some people have issues where they're dysmorphic views and stuff. You know, they want to be heroin addict thin, like the fashion model Photoshop magazine people or whatever it is. And no matter how thin they are, it's never enough. Different issue. Okay? But as far as you can't say with certainty what's the optimum weight. Those rules of thumb are just rules of thumb. Okay? There's a range, but what I can tell you is that it's possible to do assessment of a given individual and help them come up with a range that makes sense for them and target zones.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about cognitive decline?
Yeah, that's a problem. BDNF, though, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is one of the markers that's associated with preventing dementia to cognitive decline, goes up with two things we know for sure. One is exercise, one is fasting. So periodic fasting, a health-promoting diet, and exercise may very well turn out to be the things you can do to slow down the progression of cognitive decline. This is an area that the Buck Institute is very interested in. They're doing heavy research on that. We'll find out more about that next month when we start working with the Buck. Yeah.
I have a friend that just had a stroke fasting.
They had a stroke fasting?
No, they had a stroke. Would fasting be anything
Oh, well,
to help?
I mean, the most important thing...
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we don't like that. You know, fasting is not absolute protection against having a stroke. So in other words, you can be fasting and you can still have a stroke, which is one of the problems with people that have anticoagulant therapy. It's not always possible to just say, we'll stop that and we'll do a fast, but you don't want to fast on the anticoagulants. It gets to be a touchy area. Now, if a person has a stroke, most of the time it turns out high blood pressure is the leading thing. The most effective way of resolving high blood pressure is fasting. Fasting normalizes blood pressure, and then a health-promoting vegan SOS-free diet helps sustain blood pressure. Now, where they are now will depend on what drugs they've got them on and how long it takes to stabilize them off the drugs before you know whether the vigors of fasting is appropriate. But the diet is appropriate now. So we do the diet now. At some point, fasting may be a facilitator. Good news is, though, you don't have to do fasting to get tremendous results with the risk factors for stroke. You can do that with diet if they're willing to do it. So we still often like to lock them up long enough to where they get used to doing it. And then once they get used to doing it, then they can be free living. But, you know, if they want to not have another stroke and they're at huge risk for a second stroke, they've got to get serious about doing the diet and lifestyle stuff right now.
Does GFR ever improve?
Yes, GFR, glomerular filtration rate, is just a measure of kidney function, and fortunately it can improve. Not usually quick or simple, and fasting isn't always the answer, because if creatinine levels are too high, you may not be able to handle the vigors of fasting, so we have to. But with diet and lifestyle change, we definitely see normalization in many cases of GFR, and sometimes quite profoundly, normalization of creatinine and improvement.
What's GFR?
Glomerular filtration rate, the rate with which the kidneys process materials. Critical issue.
Do you recommend a sleep mask for somebody who can't get a totally dark environment in their house?
Yeah, you can use both hearing buffer and, although why can't we get a dark in the...
Well, first of all, we live in Reseda, which is a just bright environment. Like there are outside lights we can't control.
Well, no, you can have blackout windows, blackout drapes.
And then my husband needs light to help him wake up in the morning, so he likes to leave the shades open a little. And so the minute the light comes in, it
But if we went to bed early enough, why would we need light to wake up in the morning?
Oh, that's a good question. And also sometimes we leave a hall light on because it's a complicated.
But the thing is, you can leave a hall light on, but still close the door, and you can use blackout shades. Cool, dark, quiet place works better for high quality sleep. But if you can't, yeah, you can use blackout lights.
Or a sleep mask.
You can use sleep mask, and you know it's also really good on the planes. You know, when you go on the plane, you always want to have ear protection because they're noisy as hell, and that's part of the exhaustion that you get flying is listening to 80 decibel. And then a sleep mask, because then if you have ear protection and that nice neighbor, because you don't want to be rude because you're one of those nice people, and you don't want to just say, hey, leave me alone. So for you, you put the ear, and then you just point to your ear. and then you put the blinds up, and that's it. And they leave you alone. You know, so good. See, that's a nice way. You don't. Then they want to drone on and on about the.
The absolute best sleep masks that you can get are from Brookstone.
Yeah.
They're so thick. It's like.
What about the Darth Vader one?
So comfortable.
Yeah, Brookstone.
And you don't like freak out if you wake up and you can't.
No, it's
Okay.
That's what just knocks you out sometimes.
Okay, we are done. Now, today is the...
Today's the Iron Chef
Okay,
competition.
so we're going to... Oh, I had a couple things I have to ask you.
Okay, can I just sign off?
Yeah.
Chef AJ here, broadcasting live from TrueNorth Health Center in Santa Rosa. Thank you so much for watching Dr. Alan Goldhamer. If you don't have the health in the body you deserve, if you want to achieve optimum health, just remember these 5 words. Do everything Dr. Goldhamer says.
Yeah.